Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. Tyson is our guest on today's interview. He's a good guy. He's becoming a friend. He's a guy who he's a leadership consultant. He has been running and involved with student leadership for many, many years. He's a public speaker. He's a motivational speaker. You're going to enjoy this interview. He's got a lot of good advice. He's got a lot of great stories to talk. He talks about why he's a chef because he can make it himself. I'll let him explain that. He talks about attitude and choice and authenticity and about being consistent and why he's an unapologetic nerd. There's a lot of really fun stuff in the interview, but I think there's a lot of really good takeaways as well. Not to make this too corporate. It's a very relational interview with Ian. You're going to enjoy it. Check it out. Don't forget to check out my site, davidpecklive.com, for a new interview pretty much on the week. Also posted on rabble.ca. And here's
Well,
Ian.
welcome to Face to Face. It is a cold, kind of damp, dreary afternoon, Monday, December 21st, I believe. We're joined by a very special guest today, Ian Tyson. Ian, thanks for joining us today on Face to Face.
My pleasure, David. Thanks for having me.
So your slogan, positively speaking.
Yes. Very recent new slogan.
Recent
that I've adopted. Yes.
So you're a public speaker. You're a motivational speaker. You've been involved with the youth leadership camps since 1992. You've been working in schools, corporate environments. Why are you such an optimist?
Wow, that's an excellent and long question that I wrote an entire book to answer.
Okay, well, do tell. Do tell.
I think it just comes out of. Sorry, there's a truck beeping outside there. I'll start again. I thought it was something in my apartment.
No worries. I hope nobody's in your apartment.
No, nobody's in my apartment.
Okay, good.
I think that I've just always been a positive person. Obviously, as anything in this life, a lot of it comes from my upbringing. I mean, my dad was a positive guy in spite of the obstacles that we had when I was younger, and a lot of it's from my parents. My mom, who passed away when I was 10 and had been ill for 7 years with a brain tumor, was a positive person who always believed she was going to be well, and always believed in just creating a good day for those people around her. And my dad, who raised 3 kids on his own essentially, and we never wanted for anything. There was always laughter in the house, and that was just the kind of guy he is. Obviously, a lot of that stuff translates into the adults that we all become. And I've just always wanted to spread that around to as many people as I possibly could. From a fairly young age, I liked being on the stage, and then I got involved in student leadership, and just kind of the two things really melded together in this career that I have fallen backwards into.
So is there any kind of, any kind of religious edge to this at all, Ian, in the sense like, I've spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, the whole sort of the Buddhist meditative sort of mindset of, you get out of bed every day. I remember reading a book on meditation, and I've mentioned this before on podcasts where the thinkers, the Buddhists talk about, putting a smiling face on the ceiling, so as soon as you wake up, that's the first, so it's, it's a power of positive thinking, that kind of stuff. How do you stay in that sort of place? To me, it's, I've got a bit more of a melancholic edge, do you know what I mean? Like, you open up the newspaper, or you go to bbcnews.com. There's sometimes there's not a whole lot to be optimistic about.
Sure. Few different questions there, and I'll tackle them as best I can.
Yeah.
There's not really a religious aspect to anything that I do. I certainly have my own spirituality, which I consider it more spirituality than religion.
Sure.
And not as anything formalized. So faith and things like that doesn't really enter into it for me, and I speak to all kinds of groups, and from a business point of view, sort of need to keep that
Yeah, of course.
in that way.
Yeah.
But as far as how do you maintain it, look, it's an ongoing battle, and that's the thing that I say to people all the time, that it's work. You have to get up every day and want it and go get it. It doesn't just happen. One of the key phrases I use in many of my presentations, my mantra really for my life, is pain is inevitable, misery is a choice. Bad things are going to happen, as you say, with all of these things that go on in the world. You open up a paper, you go online, you turn on the news. There's a lot of bad stuff, certainly. And that can give us tasks to move forward to try and make the world a better place. But we can't allow the negativity to bog us down and to make us miserable. Misery is a choice. Does that mean I don't have bad days? Of course not. I have bad days. I have dark times. I get in a bad mood sometimes. But it's the work, understanding that, okay, this is where sometimes I'll wallow in it, admittedly, but then it's the going, okay, wait a second, what am I doing? And then just do whatever little things you have in place for yourself to keep yourself up, keep yourself motivated. I mean, when I hear people talking about success and happiness and positivity as though they're a gift, that bothers me, because it's not. You have to go get it. But so many people, unfortunately, in this world think that the good things in life will be presented to you somehow. They will fall before your feet. They will be on a silver platter. No, you got to want it. You got to go get it.
Which kind of, yeah, I guess it does kind of fly in the face of that idea of, I guess, what is it, more situational, I guess, happiness in a sense?
Sure. Well, they talk about, I've done some reading and talked with many people. They talk about situational depression as that's a thing, and then there's definitely situational happiness. And some people just, I guess it, like you said, how making it your default. And general happiness, feeling up, feeling good about life, yeah, I want that to be my default.
Sure.
Is it on every given day? No, certainly not. But I do as many things as I can to get myself into that place, because I know I feel better, and I know that I can then positively affect the people around me just simply by being happy.
So you really do then believe that we are I hate to say this because it sounds so conditional. I was going to say we are what we do, and I don't really mean it in a superhero-like sense, because that's very much what a superhero would say, right? That's what Batman says in the film. That's what Spider-Man says. With comes great responsibility. I mean, it's all about their actions. I don't want to turn optimism or positivity into something that's conditional necessarily, but really it is about, what I love about it, I suppose, Ian, is that you're saying it's about being empowered. It's about making the right choices.
It's all about choice.
Right.
People talk about the life they want. Well, do whatever you can to create it. Create the proper scenario in which to have that success and have that happiness. I've found a lot of peace, especially in my adult life. I've always had trouble meditating. That's always something I've strived for, but I have a very busy mind, and I have trouble quieting it. But one of the times when I feel closest to what I hear described as meditation is when I cook.
Interesting. Okay.
I love to cook.
Yeah.
It relaxes me in a way I can't even explain, and there's a whole lot of great metaphors in there as well that, much like life, it is about the ingredients you put in.
Well, it's very much a Buddhist sort of approach too, in the sense that
for sure.
if you're washing the dishes, a keen Buddhist would say, wash the dishes. Don't be thinking about the film that you're going to watch later or the book that you're going to be reading later. But so in other words, doing dishes is not a stepping stone to getting to the book. It's an end in itself.
Yes. Well,
So-
there's a great movie, Chef, that Jon Favreau wrote and directed.
I know the one.
Started. Fantastic movie, and there's a great moment that not a lot of people would actually wait for. It's at the very end of the credits.
Oh, okay.
And it shows, it's not a scene from the film or anything. It's got nothing to do with the narrative. It's him being trained by basically his chef coach.
Oh, okay, cool.
Favreau being trained, and there's a scene where he makes a grilled cheese sandwich for his son.
Oh, you know what? That is such a great scene in that film.
Oh, and it's the most decadent, amazing-looking grilled cheese in the world.
It really
It makes you hungry watching it. That whole movie makes me hungry.
Yeah,
but there's this fantastic. It's just a small little moment. So there's this an Asian gentleman who's his chef coach, basically his stunt chef. And they're on the flat top, and he's showing them, and John's asking questions. So, okay, where's the hot spot? And he's showing them, and the guy keeps, okay, and so you peek under, and you do it, and you peek in under, and he says this one thing, which is magnificent and speaks to what you were just saying. He said, and there's nothing in the world but this.
And there's nothing in the world but this.
But this. Yeah. And he's looking at this sandwich as it's cooking, and it looks so beautiful. And he just says, and there's nothing in the world but this.
Right.
And that is so true to it. And that's one of the things that I like. But that's one of the things that helps me to find calm, in that it removes everything else. But I see so many great, and one of the reasons I'm writing a presentation with food and cooking being the metaphor for life is that it's about the ingredients you put in. I mean, I could choose. I live right beside a 24-hour grocery store. I could go over and buy frozen food and pre-made things and something that somebody else did and make it easy for me. Or I could go and buy the fresh ingredients and make it myself.
Right.
And it's the same as the happiness and the success that we want in our lives. Do we want it handed to us by somebody else, pre-made in the way they wanted to do it, or do we want to create our own thing? And positivity is the same way. It's about the ingredients you put in. I can feel happy on any given day, even if I've been low, by doing little things that I know will contribute to my positivity.
Yeah.
And contribute to my happiness.
And that certainly gets, I mean, all of this gets my attention, Ian. I love this stuff, but this whole idea of the little things, and I mean cooking is the sum of its parts. You know, the little spice, the little sugar, a little too much salt can ruin it, not enough doesn't quite get it. You know, it's all about it coming together and kind of coalescing, and it seems to me, I mean, talk about a metaphor for life.
Oh, sure.
Right? And for relationships and so on. So what do you do when you head to your local favorite bookstore, and you must do this from time to time, go to that self-help motivational psychology section, and you go, okay, this is getting a little out of hand here, all these how-to books and the 12 steps to this and the 8 steps to that and the 4 things you need to do to become, a joyful, happy person.
Sure.
What do you do with that?
Well, there's a couple of things in observations when I see stuff like that. One, when I'm looking at those kinds of books, I mean, I'm certainly a very visual guy, and covers and titles will draw me in, and have drawn me in the past with books that I've read. There's certainly a lot where there's the either straight-up celebrities or celebrity speaker types or ex-pros of some kind have written. What I always find most interesting with those is there another name under theirs on the cover of the book? Whatever celebrity person with so-and-so, which means that second person with the smaller writing probably did the lion's share of the work.
Right.
It's just the person with the name who's getting their picture on the cover and everything else. So I find that a little interesting. I like sometimes finding the books that, okay, I don't know who this person is, but I'm intrigued by their concept.
Right.
That's the thing that draws me in. And yeah, it is a little out of control because, look, it's a business.
Yeah.
Self-help is a business. And it was interesting when I did my book that, and you're doing the ISDN number and all that stuff, and where does it get categorized? And is it self-help? I mean, it's a bunch of stories and things that I've observed, and will it help? I hope so, but do I want it categorized? Self-help has become a real, albatross to carry sometimes. And so that's it's a dangerous slope, because there's a fine line between, and I'm trying to think of a couple of examples. I mean, I'm looking around the room at some of my books right now, but there's a fine line between a Dr. Phil book, which has its place, and if it speaks to someone great, and say a powerful story of someone who's overcome something. Like if I put a Dr. Phil book next to Christopher Reeve's Still Me, explaining, everything that happened after his accident and his whole life, and that and Nothing is Impossible, his 2 books, which were so beautiful and so inspirational, I would take either of those books any day of the week over a Dr. Phil book.
Do you make a distinction between inspirational and motivational?
They're fairly. I tend to use those terms pretty interchangeably.
Right.
So sometimes I'm not even aware of which one I'm throwing in there.
It kind of makes me, I've wondered about the whole self-help thing myself. I mean, I've certainly, been through enough therapy in my day. I've read enough self-help books in my day, leadership books. David, you got to get this one because, the 4-hour work week might have been one of the last ones I read, very specifically a few years ago, but I'm sure I flipped through a few since. So it makes me wonder, is it really, Ian, about the fact that this is a massive business? Okay, so that might be one sort of idea. Then, but maybe something else there. It's more than a two-sided coin for sure. But this is tough, right? Like,
Sure.
this isn't easy to focus on the grilled cheese sandwich. is not easy to do.
No. Well,
right? So maybe there's a reason why there's so many of these books and these 12 steps and 8. I hate 8 and 10 and 12 step programs. I really do. I think it's reductionism of the worst kind because we're all so different. We all are carrying different baggage. We're all broken in our own way. And so to say that these are the 8 things you need to do to become an optimistic or happy or contented or successful person, I think it's kind of dangerous, actually.
Oh,
on
definitely.
Some level.
But why there's so many? I mean, it's the same reason there are so many types of music. It's the same reason there are so many types of movies, types of TV shows, so many religions. Is that there's something for everyone. It's even in my world of speaking professionally. The thing I've had to come to terms with, and just for ego purposes you almost need to in this business, is the realization that everybody in the speaking world is somebody's cup of tea.
Funny.
In that I can be at a conference with a bunch of other speakers, which is always, and that's how we met, and it's always great, and maybe you sit in on somebody's session and just professionally go, super nice person, but, maybe not the best on the mic or whatever, some thoughts going through your head, and, maybe that wasn't the best story, or, ooh, that got a little weird at one point or whatever, but then you see somebody come up after the presentation and shake their hand and say, that was the best thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody, I know that the stuff I do, that maybe not everybody's going to pick up what I'm laying down.
Yeah, sure.
But
sure.
For some, that speaks to them. So there is something to speak to everyone. It's the same reason that some people will go to self-help. Some people will pick up a Bible. Everybody needs something to cling to hold on to, to give them their center, and whatever that may be. That's going to be different for everybody. So that's probably why there are so many, so they can cast a wide net.
Are there any classics for you? Is it I don't know. Is it Stephen Covey for you? Is it old school Dale Carnegie? Do you go all the way back to the pre-Socratic philosophers? I mean, who are some of the foundational guys for you? And women, by the way.
It's an interesting question. I mean, I like reading new stuff, and I like hearing things that people within the business that I know are doing. I mean, I just walked back over into my office so that I could look at some of my books and see what I have here. And, I mean, I've probably read Christopher Reeve's book several times.
That's interesting, yeah.
Because,
and give us the name of that book. I haven't read that.
Still Me
is
his first one, and Nothing is Impossible.
Nice.
Is his second one. Fantastic books about his life before and after he had his accident.
So I remember years ago, so I you may not know this, but I used to do a lot of magic, stage magic, and performed for many, many years. And I remember I used to do a silent act, and 15 minutes long, tales, could have been done in vaudeville, music, Harper's Dinner Theater, so 25 years ago. And a guy, Ray Lawler was his name. I can't believe that's on the tip of my tongue. Off it comes. Ray Lawler comes. He's a former director of theater. And afterwards, David, all the lovely pleasantries, etc. And he said, you know what? I think you need to read more biographies. And you need to read more of just people. In other words, broaden your experience. It's going to make you a better performer. And I bet you if he was listening in, he'd say, actually what I meant was, David, if you read those biographies, it's going to make you a better person.
Oh, sure.
Do you know what I mean?
And I mean, I look, my top 2 shelves in my bookshelf in my office are largely biographies. I mean, I have both of Christopher Reeve's. I have both of Michael J. Fox's.
Yeah, they're
I even
excellent.
have, I have two Barack Obama books, a Denzel Washington book called A Hand to Guide Me. I even have Lance Armstrong's It's Not About the Bike, which at the time when I read it was like, wow, what a great story.
Sure,
And yes, all that stuff's happened after the fact, but at the end of the day, the battle with cancer that he had is still what an amazing story.
Well, and do you know what's interesting, too? It's still a great story, period.
Oh, for
period.
sure.
No matter what happens, it's still a great story. There are still lessons to be learned, right?
Well, and I love, too, I've got a couple up here that I read, again, and these have nothing to do with anybody overcoming any, illness or injury like with Christopher Reeve or with Michael J. Fox or anything like that, but there was, they did as a series of books and as documentaries, Ewan McGregor, the actor, and his best friend Charlie Borman rode motorcycles around the world. They went from England to New York on motorcycles.
I know this. I remember they went through Mongolia, and the reason I know that is because I was in Mongolia at the time, and they did a huge documentary on this as well, right?
Yeah, it was called The Long Way Round.
The Long Way Round, thank you. Yeah,
and then they also did The Long Way Down, which was northern Scotland to the southern tip of Africa.
Okay, yep.
And both of them, it's just two guys who are best mates riding their motorcycles, but there was obstacles in their way, and there was the observing of the poverty and the different way people live, and I read them voraciously. I enjoyed those stories because it was very visual in the way they described it, and I was there, and it was very experiential and was fantastic. And so there's stuff like that I read. But looking on here, I've got the Book of Awesome. I've got 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. All these other leadership ones and things that have been passed along. I've got books from friends of mine in the business. I have a couple of Robin Sharma books. I have Make It So, Leadership Lessons from Star Trek: The Next Generation. I mean, I've got them all up here, but I like getting information. I'm a story guy.
So, at the risk of let's not go the reductionistic route, but what are some of those common denominators for great leaders? I mean, you've been working with youth leaders since 1992 with the conference. I'd love to hear more about that as well. You speak to a lot of young people, up and coming leaders that are starting to, actually not up and coming leaders, but leaders in their environment.
Sure.
And maybe world leaders one day, right? I mean,
one would hope.
Yeah, one would hope. So what are there any kind of common denominators, things that sort of stand out to you?
Attitude's huge.
Yeah.
And that's why it's one of the things that I talk about the most is the attitude that we bring and the choice to at least strive for positivity. Mm-hmm. That one's big. And a big thing for me always has been professionally for myself as a speaker and other speakers that I know, and then also in observing leaders of all kinds, from student right up to business, is authenticity. That, are you the same person, just in speaking terms for a moment, are you the same person on stage as you are
off stage? Yeah, sure.
Because I see people go up and give a fantastic presentation.
Sure.
They put the mic down and then they duck out of the room and don't want to talk to anybody, or I see them be jerks to people.
Right.
And that stuff happens.
Yeah,
but also for if it's a kid running a student council program, when they're up on mic and they're being all rah, 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 and they're great and positive and excited, but then as soon as they get off stage, they're bad-mouthing kids from another group or saying things about behind somebody's back. Same thing could be applied in business. Somebody who's leading a group, but then at the same time is kind of undercutting or saying things behind somebody's back. Authenticity in that regard is huge. That to me is a big sign of true leadership, of being consistent with the core you.
Would you throw? I love the word consistency as well, because it's so. I mean, again, we're back to basically freedom and choice and responsibility, which is a running theme throughout pretty much every podcast that I do. I mean, it's essentially modern, from a philosophical perspective. It's modern existentialism in a nutshell, right? It's
sure. Don't talk to me about existentialism. I was an English major. Still makes my head hurt when somebody brings up existentialism.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
It's fourth-year critical theory, and I don't want to talk about it. But no.
That's right. There's no way to be optimistic about existential philosophy. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, it's heavy. that is a heavy coat to wear.
That's right. Well, actually, it is. I mean, there's no question, and I think that's part of the reason why I sometimes tend towards the melancholic and so on. But at the same time, I also think there's something really empowering about some of that stuff.
I make jokes. That's the other thing that I do. So yeah.
There's the what's interesting is there's a great book out there called I'm going to pull it up here in a second. A Guide to the Good Life.
Okay.
And the subtitle is The Ancient Art of Stoic Joy. And it's essentially like we're talking 3,200-year-old thinking.
Wow.
And you go through it and they're quoting some of these early Stoic philosophers and you're like, holy smokes, isn't this just Dale Carnegie? Or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just, so there's almost like there's this nothing new under the sun kind of. It's just been repackaged or it's been repurposed.
Well, you read any of the books by the Dalai Lama. I mean, The Art of Happiness and all of these things. And it's all ancient wisdom.
Ancient wisdom, yeah.
Which I love too. I mean, I have a copy of the Tao Te Ching. I've read the Tao of Pooh and the Tay of Piglet,
right,
and those are also really interesting in the way that they take something that's a little more modern in pop culture and break it down.
What kind of movies do you like?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I'm a huge movie guy.
Oh, are you? Okay, yeah. Well,
if
you're driven by story.
Yes, I am driven by story. I have probably 250 movies in my personal
and
collection.
is it a wide range, or are you more the hey, I want to feel good at the end of a film kind of guy?
It's a wide range. I mean, certainly I'm unapologetically a nerd.
Okay.
And I have a huge section of just science fiction and fantasy and superheroics and things like that. And there are a lot of go-tos in there that I would throw on that will just make me feel good. There are also movies that I will watch that I know I'm going to cry.
Right.
It's inevitable that I'm going to cry. And sometimes even ones within that realm, within that side. I mean, I'm just coming up on, I have an annual tradition, and I usually do it on my own, of watching the entire original Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Right.
Extended editions, because the books were released at Christmas time, and Jackson released the movies at Christmas time.
Right.
So the first year that there wasn't a Lord of the Rings movie at Christmas, I got really bummed out. So I watched all of them. And it's just kind of but I know at the end of Return of the King, when everything's all done and they're coronating Aragorn as the king, and he comes over and the four hobbits go to bow to him, and he says, "My friends, you bow to no one."
You bow to no one.
And everybody, I'm going to be blubbering. I love that. And,
no, it's a great scene.
But I also have many dramas. I mean, I've got things like Good Will Hunting and the Dead Poets Society, and go back to classics like Rocky and all of these. Yeah, I love stories.
What I love is, I saw Creed recently, and I mean, it's just.
I've been wanting to see that one.
Yeah, it's worth seeing, and in a way, it's just Rocky 2 that's been, again, redone, repurposed. But Sylvester Stallone's wonderful, but I love the lessons that can be taken. I mean, these are parables,
Oh, definitely.
Adam Agoyan and others have said, that the movie houses are the cathedrals of our time. I mean, what are the morals? What are the values? What are the, as you say, attitude is huge. What are the attitudes that are being taught through the movies and through the stories that we ingest, that we read, that we watch?
And it's interesting, because I was just talking with this about a friend after seeing the new Star Wars, which is fantastic.
By the way, I was there Friday night.
I was there Thursday.
Speaking, come on! So you are more of a nerd than I am, even. So
but
you got
all
me
I would
beat.
say, and I'll go spoiler-free, because even when this airs at the end of January, some people may not have seen it. But we were talking about the original trilogy, and there was some mention of the fact that the new movie there was a familiarity there to the original Star Wars movie in the story points.
Sure.
And the point that I argued, because again, being an English major, this was something that I studied, was one of the things that George Lucas did after he had an original script for Star Wars that just didn't seem to be resonating for him, was he sat down and spoke with Joseph Campbell, who's a scholar who wrote the book The Hero with 1,000
Okay, you're not okay. You want the cosmos coming together. I picked up that book today from the bookstore that
Are you kidding?
I buy my
It's
books
fantastic.
from.
It's fantastic.
Hero with what are the odds of that?
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, because what I love with Campbell, and I've seen many interviews with him and read the book and everything else when I was an English major, was this whole idea, and we circle back to ancient wisdom, that the great stories, the great parables, the from the Homeric hymns to the stories in the Bible to the Grimm's nursery rhymes to all of these like epic stories, Shakespeare, things like that that stand the test of time, that continue to be read and studied again and again and again, all have the same signposts. They hit the same marks at the same point, and he, in a very good way, really reduces it down to a generic term. So and he shows the story arc and said, this is going to happen here, and this in a generic sense, and could be taken in a million different directions, but this type of emotional impact or story element is going to happen here. And so Lucas went back and rewrote the script and hit all the sign points. And I've seen interviews with Lucas where he talks about, if you look at each of the original trilogy movies, for Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, each of the movies follows that arc, the arc of the hero within the movie.
Sure, yeah.
But the hero changes, and then if you look at all three of the original, there is that arc of the hero goes through the entire three movies and hits those same points. And then if you even add in the prequel trilogy, which a lot of people have bad things to say about, and I understand why, but that same arc is applied to each of those three movies, and then the arc is applied to, and then you can take the entire arc over the whole 6 movies as the story of Anakin Skywalker. It's really fascinating.
So what is it about story for you, story and leadership? That's okay. Is it a way to connect with your audience? Is it a way to connect with young people? Or is it also a way to teach sort of indirectly?
It's a way to teach. I mean, I've always loved telling stories. From when I was a kid, something would happen and I could relate. I've always been able to spin a good yarn.
Right.
And I was able to get positive attention when I was a kid from telling stories, and especially as a teenager. I remember sitting at a dinner party with friends in my first year university, and some of my friends from home had come to Ottawa, where I was living and going to school, and about 12 of us sitting around a table, and I still remember my oldest friend, Ryan, sitting beside me, and I was down near the head of the table, and something had come up in conversation. I started telling a story, and I literally stood up. I was so excited. It was telling the story. And Ryan, I don't know if he ever knew, we may have talked about it after the fact, but I heard him say, just kind of low, he leaned over the person and goes, I love when Ian tells the story. And that's always been I've loved doing that. Sure, part of it's about attention and the love that you get from an audience, be it a small group of people at a dinner party or 1,000 kids in an assembly. I certainly love that. That instant gratification and feedback is fantastic. But yeah, it's a way to relate, much like any parable or any of these, far-reaching stories. If it's weaving message in there,
right.
And if there's message, there's lesson. Morality tale, whatever it may be, then that helps the story be more engaging, and the impact after the fact.
So we've got a few more minutes to go, Ian. I really want to talk a little bit about the future. I want to talk about change. I want to talk about leadership and how that's going to impact where we're heading. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old. Son and daughter, so it's very much on my mind. The seeds that we plant, the stories that we tell within our house, within the how we're bringing our kids up, what they're learning at school, and so on. Environment's a big thing around here. My daughter's a vegetarian. She's 8 years old, right? By choice. Nobody's.
Well, I've been there. Mine are 19 and 20 now. My kids. And
You've clearly been through all of this, but so. You're an optimist. You're working with young people. You clearly are hopeful about what's coming and about what's next. Tell me why. I mean, is it? Are we talking about a more motivated generation today than we were 40, 50 years ago? Because, you hear the naysayers, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you hear the naysayers. I would say, I don't know that we have, every generation is motivated, it's just where that motivation is directed.
Right.
And so that becomes the key thing. One of the things I read when I was researching for my book, which I found really interesting, there was I think it was a Time article where scientists basically said, and I loved this concept, that human beings are hardwired for positivity. Where most people would say, oh, the default for most folks is the negative. But the argument here was scientifically, if we were hardwired and just automatically defaulted to negativity, emotionally, the human race would not have continued.
Right.
If we didn't have hope for the future, we would not create a new generation. Because if we were so bogged down by the possibility or the certainty in our own minds that the world is such a terrible place, there was no way we would bring new life into it. Instinct aside, we would, if our instinct was to be negative, then why would we bring anything else into it?
I remember a guy who worked almost did work vaudeville. He was a ventriloquist, an older guy, passed away about 15 years ago now, whose argument for not having children was because there was no hope, that and he would bring newspaper clippings to share with me about crime in Toronto and articles out of magazines, and I mean, who knows, maybe in his old age that was his way of justifying the fact that they didn't have kids. But this was a really horrible world that we were heading into, therefore ...
Well, I would say this. Certainly, you can pull any article or news story, and we all know if it bleeds, it leads. They try and sell the negative; it gets people watching. But in any of those stories of crime and just corruption and anything else that you read, the part that doesn't get pushed to the front in a lot of those stories is that there's probably in each of those stories somebody who stepped up and tried and do something. The police that came to the aid of the people that were shot. The organizations that raise money of the people who lost their houses due to corruption or whatever it may be. There's the positivity gets pushed to the periphery, but it's there, and it's why we keep going. And we've talked a lot today about narrative, and that's one of the things I try and bring across to kids as well, is if you don't, and to the adults I speak to, whoever it may be, that we create our own narrative.
Right.
And so if we're just preaching a negative narrative to ourselves, that's the way it's going to be. If you keep believing something, you're going to find a way to make it so.
I've always loved the comment about how many muscles it takes to smile.
Yeah.
There's just some really interesting stats around that, and it's kind of funny coming from me, just because if you knew me better, you'd probably know I like to laugh, there's no question, but I'm the kind of guy who'll stand at the back of the room, instead of actually laughing out loud, I'll just go, oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But I won't actually laugh.
It's funny because as someone who loves and studies comedy, and I talked with a couple of comedian friends of mine about this recently, and we talked about if you're live and seeing a comedian live, we'll be the loudest people laughing. Right. But if I'm watching something funny at home, stand-up special or anything like that, I'm not laughing.
Right.
Because I'm studying.
Right.
I'm observing, like, ooh, see the way they turn that phrase?
That's right. Sure.
That's good.
Yeah.
Not like I'm going to take that. It's just how did you craft that story?
Yeah.
How did you deliver that line? Or that didn't go well, but you recovered.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me.
Sure. Well, it's from a theatrical
it's all about
perspective.
narrative and just the story that we tell ourselves and the story that we tell others.
So you aren't too concerned about the future then, going into high schools, being in front of thousands of young people over the last 25 years. You're not too worried about where we're heading. You are hopeful still.
I see wonderful kids out there every day. I see kids that are hopeful, that are positive, that want to change the world. I don't know what that world's going to look like. Mm-hmm. It's certainly a very different world from when I started speaking 26 years ago. When I started speaking, I would call people and mail them contracts and all these things. Now I can book an entire school or an entire tour and never speak to anyone on the phone. It's all done by email.
Sure.
Technology dictates a lot of things, and there's an ebb and flow to all of this stuff. I see the cycles that happen, and we may go through some down periods, but in every show that I do, because people don't realize you can see every face when you're
Right,
out there.
right, sure.
I
yeah.
see every face, and I look in their eyes, and I can see the hope. And what it's going to look like, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't think it's as doom and gloom as the narrative we are being fed would tell you.
Yeah, somebody just the other day even was going on. I don't know if it was a dinner party that I was at or what it was, but essentially the message was, these, and I don't even know if we've moved beyond the millennial generation or not, but the line was, oh, these millennials, don't you know? Kind of being a nostalgic old
Because
fart.
that's the narrative that's gone on
Yeah.
about the millennials.
Yeah, because, oh, gee, well, it's the classic, right? It's the old Monty Python skit. It's when I was a kid. Look what I had to do when I was a kid, right?
Oh, for sure.
We worked so much harder. I had 4 jobs to make ends meet.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
that.
What was it? Get up at 4 a.m. Now
That's
before we
right.
went to bed.
That's right. All that
Have
classic.
gravel for breakfast.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Well, at least you had a father. Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
It's just it's actually it seems like what's that line from that old song? Boy, now I'm going to date both of us.
Okay.
Every generation blames the one before.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Mike and the Mechanics. There you go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that one called? Living Years.
The Living Years.
Great
there you
song.
go. We are both old farts, Ian.
Yes, we really are. But you got to love the 80s.
You do have to love the 80s. How can you not love the 80s?
That's not just a statement. That's a rule. You have to love the 80s.
You should get that put on a T-shirt. I bet you'd make a few bucks off that. It's
quite possible.
Yeah. Ian, thanks a lot for joining us today. I really
David,
appreciate it.
my pleasure.
Yeah. So check him out, folks. It's Ian Tyson. Ian Tyson, Tyson.ca. He's a public speaker. He's a leadership guy, and you want to check him out online. So yeah, Ian, thanks again for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, David.